Hello class. We are going to talk today about nonverbal communication and writing. We listened to and saw a video clip of The Office again, and in The Office we saw that there were people using what we call the Morse code. The Morse code was developed by Samuel Morse, who developed an electric telegraph in 1830, and in 1838 he developed Morse code. What was his motivation? Samuel's wife was gravely ill and died, but he received a letter long after she died. From that moment he began thinking of ways to transfer messages in an instant from one place to another. Why the Morse code, and why this way of communication? Well, one of the things is that it was nonverbal, so we could not transmit our voices to another continent, right? In that period. So he developed the electric telegraph that was operated based on electric signals, right? So he could make signals longer or shorter. That's why he invented this method of communication, nonverbal method of communication, where you have dots and dashes. Dots and certain dots, for example, three dots means something different from two dots and a dash, right? So all of that is that is the reason why he invented the Morse code, and how he invented it, right? So he could do it based on electric signals only. The Morse code is a part of nonverbal communication, which is broadly taken as the transmission of signals accomplished by means other than spoken words. Broadly, any bodily gestures, facial expressions, touch, spacing, touching, smell, whistles, smoke signals, etc., is considered or are considered nonverbal communication. There are two broad types: from the spoken language, writing systems, and Morse code, and independent of the spoken language, sign language, right? Although sign language is the means of communication or the language on its own, so I still understand it's not a verbal communication. So there are certain important aspects and concepts that you need to understand. For most part, human communication is multi-channel, affair operating on verbal and non-verbal levels. The study of the properties of signs and symbols and their functions in communication is referred to as semiotics. So we have both verbal and non-verbal levels of communications through signs and symbols. Semiotics was the field that developed with Ferdinand de Saussure's invention of sign. Sign is a prototypical example of semiotics because it has a signifier and signified. It has a symbol and what it stands for. Therefore, it developed quite a lot, and today it is studied, right, broadly and widely, therefore it gave birth to some fields such as biosemiotics, semiotics of food, social semiotics. Then another component or concept is paralinguistics. So we're now talking about nonverbal communication, meaning that we are trying to avoid anything that has to do with strictly linguistic matter or the structure of language, right? So para means alongside in Greek, and para or para linguistics indicates characteristics of vocal communication considered marginal or optional and therefore excludable from linguistic analysis. There are three types of paralinguistic vocal communication means. The first is voice qualifiers, which indicates the tone or stands for the tone of voice, pacing of speech, articulation, tempo, intensity, and so on. Such as, for example, I'm trying to speak as fast as I can right now because this is a video. Then the voice characterizes the laughing, giggling, crying, moaning, and whining. Vocal segregates to indicate agreement or yeah, to indicate some kind of a listening, right? So all of these are classified as paralinguistics or paralinguistic features rather than linguistic features. Uh, then there is kinesics. Kinesics is the kinesics supplements speech with visual, not only with visual gestures, but with body, bodily, and visual gestures. So um, the basic assumption that underlies kinesics is that no body movement or facial expression is likely to lack meaning. It was influenced by the structural linguistics and Ray L. Birdwhistell, who was influenced by structural linguistics, in 1950s developed this method of studying and describing the body motion aspects of human communicative behavior, and wanting to parallel phonemes, for example, or morphemes. In structural linguistics, he invented kinemes. That was a unit that was defined as the smallest discriminable contrastive unit of body motion. Now, what kineme is supposed to represent is one discriminable contrastive unit of body motion. It's very difficult to define. That's why it kind of lost its influence today, I would say so. Kinesics means any kind of body or facial supplementation of speech. So facial expressions, which can be used to indicate range of emotions, and even not even but in sign language as well, are very important. Eye contact. Eye contact is culturally influenced a lot, so eye contact can mean avoidance or love, depending on which culture you belong to. Hand gestures, handshakes, for example, these can also bear negative connotations. Just think about Elon Musk and what he did recently. And there are different handshakes that are usually bear negative connotations, right? But are also very important hand gestures. Edward T. Yeah, so those are the components of kinesics. Proxemics were developed by Edward T. Hall. The study of the cultural patterning of the spatial separation individuals maintain in face-to-face encounters. So the term has subsequently come to embrace studies concerned with privacy, crowding, territoriality, and the designing of buildings, private as well as public. So proxemics are divided into 4 zones: the intimate zone, personal zone, social zone, and public zone. You can call them space or distance. I'm okay with all of these. Intimate zone or intimate distance is for embracing, touching, or whispering. Personal distance is for interactions among good friends or family. Social distance is for interactions among acquaintances, usually in class we have social distance. Public distance used for public speaking, right? When there is a huge auditorium, there is a speaker there. So Edward T. Hall was also a linguist and anthropologist who worked on developing or trying to actually analyze cultures through proxemics. So we have different privacies in different cultures. The story has it, or there is a gossip, I would say so, of Edward T. Hall venturing to the Middle East and being being approached by people there, and these people were very close to him, closer than he hoped that they would be, and that's how he understood. He saw that was kind of common in that country, in those cultures. So there was nothing out of the ordinary when it came to being very intimate with the person you don't know in terms of your spacing. So he developed, described proxemics that are now used in a lot of fields, such as crowding, territoriality, city planning, designing of buildings as well. We see in Canada that everything is broad, right? People are separate. They maintain this social distance, and that's how they also behave in a way towards their friends or with their friends too. So friendship is taken to be a bit differently than in cultures such as, for example, in mine, Serbian, also in Greek cultures, in many Slavic cultures, in many Middle Eastern cultures. I assume in most of the world, right? Except for some European cultures, such as Nordic or Germanic cultures. Yeah, so those are proxemics. Then there is a haptic behavior, the behavior that relates to the sense of touch. Differences in haptic behavior may be noticeable even among members of society that live in close proximity. For example, two Dutch individuals maintain greater distances than French and English dyads, so that's important, and they're very close countries, like very, very close to each other. People from southern France do not have the same haptic behaviors as those who have grown up and made their homes in northern France too. So um, uh, the behavior related to touch is um, also an important part of a culture. That what we call quote unquote touch cultures. Um, People in those cultures, people like to, for example, tap people on the shoulder, to indicate some kind of um, closeness or intimacy that means friendship or perhaps even just appreciation. Not even friendship, it's a strong word. So those kinds of patterns of behavior are also culturally influenced. So pay attention to when you go to another culture and country. If you happen to come across people who like to tap you on the shoulder, do not be surprised. Sign languages. Sign languages are at least all as old as speech. From the writings of ancient, they developed from the writings of ancient Greeks and Romans. We know that their deaf made use of signs. So from these writings, we know that the deaf made use of signs. Sign languages are full-fledged languages, just like any spoken languages in the world. They have their phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, and grammar. Yeah, so morphology and syntax would mean grammar. So some sign languages are American Sign Language, Navajo Sign Language, British Sign Language, and so on and so forth. And according to William C. Stockow Jr., who investigated or who explored sign languages have the same general form as the grammars of spoken languages. They are characterized by a small set of contrastive units meaningless in themselves, chiremes, that combine to form meaningful sign units, the morphemes. So analogous to phonemes and morphemes, or mainly to phonemes, they have chiremes that combine to make morphemes. The only reason why we don't call them phonemes is because they are not produced, right? They're not uttered verbally, but they are signed. Chiremes chireme refers to a set of positions, configurations, or motions that function identically in a given sign language. So we have certain, not only position of the body, but also spacing around the body, the space where the hands will go, and gestures of the face. All of that enters sign language grammar, and there are certain configurations that are being now explored in research to figure out what the discrete units are, just like in our language, in spoken language. The thing about sign language and spoken language is that these two have, or people who use these languages, these modes of communication, have the same or identically developed brain parts that control language, right? So that's why we know sign languages are, that's how we know sign languages are full-fledged languages. Each morpheme of a sign language may be defined according to hand shape, orientation of the palm and fingers, place of formation, movement and its direction, point of contact, and other spatial and dynamic features. Contrary to popular misconceptions, primary sign languages used by the deaf are highly structured, complete, and independent communicative systems comparable in complexity to spoken and written languages. And we discussed a little bit about whether we need to have an app that translates sign language into spoken language. So we had a very short debate on this. So think about that when somebody um, um, recommends or suggests that that there should be a mobile app, for example, that would translate sign language into spoken language. Think about the properties of sign language, and of course ask the deaf community as the people who use this language, right? And there is a nice little video clip of the development of American Sign Language that you can take a look at. Writing. I play to you just a bit of the history of writing and how writing developed. You can take a look at the whole documentary. It's wonderful. But writing is defined as a form of visible speech. It's impossible to say where it first began. Writing systems developed in many parts of the world, but more cultures borrowed them than invented them. What does this tell you? The connection between spoken sound and an arbitrary symbol placed on some medium is quite an abstraction. So basically, this tells you that, let's use alphabets for now, that alphabets are borrowed, or the symbols are borrowed one from another to indicate different, to signal different words. So the connection between spoken sound and symbol is quite arbitrary. It's an abstraction. So what were the first forms of writing? Proto-writing, where doodles, scratches, notes, scribbles, or any marks of any kind that could be used as mnemonic devices, so devices to remember, such as, for example, number or kills on a hunt, for example. Rebus. So all of these were used, right, to indicate something that happened as a memorization technique, so to say. Then proto-writing developed into rebus or rebuses. Rebus is a device in which pictures are used to represent words or their parts. So in this case, I represents a word I, pronoun I. Heart represents love, and Y represents New York, of course. Yeah, the rebus is a picture in this case for an I, and heart means love. So it sort of represents both the meaning and the phonetic form, which is very important. So some units were likely used for their phonetic value, just like an I here, and others for their semantic values, just like a heart, right? Out of rebuses, Chinese writing developed. How did the Chinese writing came to be? Well, it's going back at least 3,000 years ago. It was ideographic initially, a symbol that represents an idea or thing rather than a sound or word. So, for example, a smiley face. And these ideographic characters later developed, right, throughout time. For example, sun used to be circle with some kind of dots, then a circle with one dot, and in the end, this kind of symbol. Mountain used to be a range, actually three lines, three curvy lines, but then it developed to become this, where there is a little bit of iconicity, where you can see the peak and different peaks of a mountain, and a horse with 4 legs, 1, 2, 3, 4 legs, and a tail, right? So all of these developed over time from pictures, right? And we'll go back to Chinese orthography in a second. Then we have cuneiforms. Cuneiforms were Sumerian, or Sumerians developed them around 2500 BC before Christ or BCE before Common Era at the meeting of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Mesopotamia, today's southern Iraq. These were wedge-shaped marks made by a stylus in tablets of soft clay, which were then either baked or allowed to dry in the sun to harden. They were used to keep economic records for temples and other religious and official purposes. So mainly, let's say, priests used them, and people who had that kind of access back in the days. Um, and these were tablets of soft clay where you could imprint certain symbol, and they were used to indicate, they were used like spreadsheets today to indicate how many um, how much of barley was, for example, um, sold or um, traded for whatever cows, right? So cuneiforms were had certain kind of symbolic representation. It didn't mean that they were necessarily only pictures. They were pictures mainly that represented some sort of record keeping. So that was the, we are moving from pictures to some sort of representation that we have today. Hieroglyphs were very important. Hieroglyphs or hieroglyphic representations were pictographic representations, or that is a pictographic writing system developed beginning about 3000 BC in Egypt. The discovery of the, so all of these were developed around 3000 years before Christ. A discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799, which included text in Greek, Demonic, Egyptian hieroglyphics, was the key to solving the mystery. And the polyglot Jean-François Champollion used his knowledge of Coptic, similar to Demotic Egyptian, to discover that there were sound elements inherent in the hieroglyphic signs, thus allowing for their eventual decipherment. So we watched the video clip of the Rosetta Stone and what it represents. The Rosetta Stone is a monument found in Egypt, and it represents 3 languages that were translated for the purposes of the ruling regimes in that period, because there were different ruling regimes. So Egyptian hieroglyphs, Demotic Egyptian, and Greek. And of course, Jean-François Champollion knew Coptic, so he helped translate this Rosetta Stone into Greek, of course, and therefore and into Demonic Egyptian, and therefore decipher what is meant, right? Which was difficult because these were all pictographs, pictures that indicated certain concept or word, but not only concept or word. These pictures were also phonetic in their nature, because some of them indicated the sound or a syllable, such as shoe, for example. And the same symbol of a barley, let's say, could indicate barley and this sound. So that's why we needed deciphering, and still today people are deciphering different hieroglyphic writings. Yeah. So there was this switch from pictures into to certain pictographic symbols or picture-like symbols that represented not only a word, but also an idea, spoken form, such as logographs. The word logograph can be misleading if taken too literally. Many consider Chinese to be logographic, but this is not exactly the case, as Chinese writing has phonetic and morphemic components built into it. So it's not simply logographic, but it is considered to be logographic. And what we mean by phonemic and morphemic components, it means that pictures are not enough. If you want to record language fully with pictograms or with some kind of logograms, that's not enough. So words that sound the same but have different meanings are called homophones, and homophones are very present in Chinese. For example, this one can mean a tree or a wood, as I found out in the class, wood. Um, and if we add three dots next to it, it means to wash oneself or to bathe, right? But the same structure of the word, they are pronounced in a similar manner with a different tone. So to indicate this, many Chinese characters included not only logograms such as this one, but also included some kind of determinatives, which would be the three dots that we can draw maybe here. Yeah, yeah, something like that. That would represent to wash oneself. Yeah, so another orthographic system that that exists in the world is our syllabaries. Syllabaries are systems in which one symbol stands for more than one sound, that is syllables, but still it doesn't stand for a whole word or idea or concept, but syllables. So for example, in a name Starbucks, we have how many syllables? Starbucks, basically two. That we would have two symbols, right, for that word. Japanese people developed syllabaries. They were among the first who developed syllabaries by taking components of the borrowed Chinese characters and using them for their phonetic value only. This resulted in two sets of about 50 signs derived from a Chinese character, or from Chinese characters, katakana and hiragana systems, angular system, a cursive system. Men operated in the past, men operated in the public sphere, socially and politically, often knew some Chinese and wrote using the borrowed Chinese characters, kanji. Women operated using hiragana syllabary. And Tale of Genji, one of the world's first novel, one of the greatest novels in the history, was written by a woman, around the 11th century using hiragana, right? Today in Japan, hiragana is used for adverbs and modifiers. Katakana is used to write foreign names and places. And four scripts are used in general: kanji, hiragana, katakana, and Roman script. Kanji means are Chinese symbols, so borrowed Chinese symbols. Then there is Cherokee syllabaries, invented by half Cherokee Sequoia. Sequoia, there is a nice story about Sequoia that you have here in this in the notes, so you can read about it. So Sequoia met missionaries from Europe, and he was impressed with their alphabets. So he wanted to have something similar, and he developed syllabary, a mixture of Roman letters and fonts of apparently arbitrary design. So if you see Cherokee syllabary, you can notice that certain symbols are similar to Roman alphabet, to the Roman alphabet that we are using today. So the Cherokee syllabary was used not only by the Cherokee but also by missionaries working with them, and that's how Sequoia actually first invented this syllabary. And Sequoia and his daughter managed to convince the Cherokee nation, to the Cherokee people, to adopt this syllabary that they are using even today. All right, alphabets. Finally, in alphabets, each distinct sound of a language is represented by a single separate sign or letter. So notice how we progress from pictures, completely a mnemonic device, then we had rebuses that had some sort of meaning, still based on pictures, then logographs based on ideas, or that indicated certain ideas, concepts, still pictographic, right, but not completely iconic. They were arbitrary, quite arbitrary, like Chinese orthography. Then these meant a whole word, right, or concept or idea. Then from logographs we moved towards syllabaries, which indicated only two sounds or three sounds or more than two sounds, right? Syllables. And finally, we have one sound, one sound, one letter, or one sign, right? And yeah, the writing systems have evolved. We came a long way to have alphabets. The advantages of having alphabets, yeah, any one of its 1,000 words can be written down using no more than the 26 letters, for example, in English, right? And compared to Chinese, whose dictionaries have up to 50,000 characters, it's quite an advantage. Why don't Chinese adopt alphabets? That's a very different and more complex question, but in essence, because of the dialects, right, which are not mutually understandable. In short, Japanese systems are also disadvantaged in this way because still they are using a lot of characters, and students are required to learn all of them. It's very, very difficult. However, unlike syllables, relatively few alphabets have been invented, so alphabets have been borrowed, probably fewer than 20 compared to the dozens of syllables. So syllables are quite widespread, and they do not tend to borrow symbols, but alphabets do. The evidence from writing systems then suggests that syllables are, if anything, more linguistically real than segments, despite the fact that early generative phonology ignored them. This means that because of this invention of syllables, syllables are quite real across many languages. Alphabets were used by Semitic-speaking people in ancient Syria, with only consonants represent. The early alphabets were designed for the writing of Arabic, Hebrew, and Phoenician around 1000 BC. Greek developed their own alphabet based on the Phoenician system, and then Etruscans copied Greeks, and Romans copied Etruscans, and we got the so-called Latin or Roman alphabet. Cyrillic alphabet was also borrowed from Greek. Some of the symbols were borrowed from Greek, some of the symbols from Roman alphabet, quite a few. The Greek, Cyrillic, and modern Latin orthographies are sometimes called phonemic alphabets, while Phoenician, Hebrew, and Arabic are sometimes called the consonantal alphabets because their letters, for the most part, only represent consonants. Vowels are represented by using other symbols in combination or with certain diacritics, so with certain symbols above, for example, letters or next to the letters. All right, that would be it for non-verbal communication and writing. Thank you for listening.